Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CYCA. My name is Paul Billingham, Commodore of the club. Welcome to the Audi Centre Sydney Blue Water Pointscore briefing. Thank you for turning up in such great numbers. I think next year we'll have to treat it like the start of a race so that we don't all turn up at 1 minute to 6 on the line and hope to get in. So apologies for the late start. This evening shouldn't take too long, 20-25 minutes. I'll just make a couple of announcements and then David Jordan, our race committee chair, will talk about the race that's coming up at the weekend. This isn't just about the Flinders Islet race, of course. It is about the Blue Water Series, so I do appreciate you coming along just to listen to these important announcements. It's part of what we try and do to improve the safety and fairness and so on of our race. There are a couple of things I just want to draw to your attention this year that we're trying to improve or impress on you to take part in. Firstly, the social media. It's something we've been doing for a number of years now, is trying to encourage greater participation from those who are watching the race from the outside. So we're trying to improve the content that we get coming onto our websites, onto the CYC website and the race websites. That helps us obviously attract and maintain our sponsors, but also for you as boats to attract and maintain your sponsors. We'd love to be able to tell the story of your teams on the various races you're doing in this series. So we're asking you to provide us with interesting footage of when you're going fast, when you're going slow, when there's good issues, bad issues, problems, boredom, excitement, whatever it might be, and send that through to us. And you can also post obviously directly to the Facebook site, the Twitter site and so on, using the hashtag Audi Centre Sydney BWPS, so we can see that post or share it around, or in the alternative, just send us whatever media you've got to media@cyca.com.au and we'll post that for you. If you give us information about who took the media and what it's of, which boat and so on. It's all about bringing this sort of racing to the public. There's a lot of interest in members, but obviously with it being the sort of world it is now, electronic communications is key. So whatever we can do to promote the sport, we'd really appreciate that. Secondly, on the safety side, an initiative this year which we haven't done for a few years. On the 1st of October here at 6:30 p.m. is a free event on Beyond First Aid. It's an information evening that's been set up by our cruising committee to talk about how best to manage injuries on board the boat, whether they're broken limbs or ribs, head injuries or hand injuries and so on and so forth. It goes beyond, I guess, the standard safety first aid certificates that a lot of you have already. It talks about drugs, how you actually administer drugs at sea, injections and so on and so forth. The evening will be presented by two top medical professionals in Dr. Gordian Fuld and Virginia Ferner, as well as other healthcare teaching professionals. There'll be a practical aspect of it as well. It is a free event. We do ask you to register on the website, but it's just what we're trying to do to improve, I guess, the safety of the race. And so do encourage your crews to come along. It's not just open to skippers and navigators, but whoever else wants to come along as well. Then my final shout out is from Australian Sailing. For those of you who are doing the Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race, as you all know, from the 3rd to the 5th of January, we have the Australian Yachting Championships hosted by the RYCT. Online entries are now open. I think the link is on the Australian Sailing website, and probably on the RYCT website as well. So they're looking for early entries for that particular championship. So I'd love to see as many of our blue water boats as we can down there. We have, I'm told by Justine, 48 boats likely to go to Flinders Islet this week, which is, if not a record, is very close to it. So it really is showing the interest that we have in this particular point score. We had a fantastic fleet go to the Gold Coast a month or two ago. And at the moment, we're looking at more than 150 yachts heading to Hobart at the end of the year. So this is probably shaping up to be one of the biggest blue water point score series we've had in many years in our 75th year. So we're looking to do it right and do it well. With that in mind, I'm going to hand over to our very capable race committee chair, David Jordan, to brief us on the forthcoming race. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Commodore. Good evening, everyone. I'm conscious the briefing is that, so I'll attempt to be brief. I'll proceed with a short piece on pre-race matters, the races themselves, and then conclude with some post-race requirements. Please do stop me as we go through if there's an immediate need for clarification, otherwise I'll gladly take questions on completion. Firstly, thank you for your continued proactive efforts to get us all to the start line. I wish to acknowledge the efforts of owners and crews to prepare for a Blue Water Point Score series. It's a big undertaking. I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of the Sailing Office in ensuring that all our requirements are met. In respect of pre-race activity, could I ask you to not just undertake relevant training such as man overboard recovery practice, but also to document such training. Whilst they're not a mandatory item, we would encourage the use of man overboard or individual AIS. If you do choose to use those items, please note the need to register that against your boat. A reminder that for each race, the trackers will need to be picked up on the Thursday or the Friday before each race. Tracker units are required to be returned to the sailing office by close of business on Tuesday after each race. To the races themselves, I'd like to focus on a couple of points from global offshore events that have recently been held. They're interrelated. The first is hypothermia. There have been increasing reports of crew suffering from exposure, not just in the higher latitudes, but also in the temperate climates. Please do look after each other. Make sure you take a moment to check your gear and provide a little bit of comfort. Related to that is the issue of hydration and water. Please do make sure you have enough water on board, including the prescribed emergency water. Some context to the amendment about communications. You would have just seen Permanent Amendment 2. Weather forecasting technology and contemporary ICT has meant less reliance on the historic 6-hourly weather broadcasts, and those used to drive the reasoning for 4 skeds or 4 sked slots each day. There's also been a continued maturing of satellite, VHF and mobile telecommunications capabilities. At the same time, our HF infrastructure and capability has perhaps enjoyed less investment and focus at the broader level. As such, we've moved to 2 skeds per day on VHF, with Cabbage Tree Island on HF to serve as a skill preservation and qualification opportunity for the Rolex Sydney to Hobart yacht race. Just as an aside, race management may conduct random satellite phone calls throughout the race or any of the races in the Blue Water Pointscore series to build our evidence base towards demonstrating an inherent capability of satellite communications. So as per the Permanent Amendment number 2 to the sailing program, daily position reports will be via VHF 72 at 7:35 and 19:35 for Flinders, Bass and Bird races, and HF 4483 at those same times, 7:35 and 19:35 for Cabbage Tree. For the night starts, please note that we'll have the first sked, of course, in the morning at 0735. Please also note that the primary means for communications with race management is via telephone, be that satellite or mobile, to the numbers that have been provided to you. Whilst it's pleasing to observe some of our relative success with early success with VHF skeds and the like, I do encourage your continued focus on our general VHF listening, particularly as you chop to requirements around Port Kembla, for example, and then back to VHF 16. I'd also like to draw your attention to the alert function at the bottom of the yellow brick trackers. You take the unit out of the cover, lift the plastic flip lid at the bottom, and then press the red alert button. This will send an alert signal. It supplements the other primary means of alerting of distress, be that EPIRB, PLB, your main overboard AIS, telephone, radio, and of course visual aids. In relation to communications, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our past Commodore David Kellett, who's served as somewhat of a communications doyen, and with that his work with Marine Rescue New South Wales, who've been fantastic supporters and have proactively engaged with us to meet a more progressive communications regime. To some post-race matters, and rather than post-race, perhaps I should call that period after a boat has finished, because a lot of it is still about the race. Please note that the race committee preserves the right to undertake spot checks. Please also remember to submit your declaration. Declarations are as much a matter of compliance and conformance as they are an instrument for you to explain a particular circumstance. Give us a little bit more context. In the period after the finish, it's also an appropriate time to acknowledge and celebrate our achievements. At a personal level, I can assure you I've often enjoyed such moments. I'm also conscious that my wife has said to me, "Let me know when you finish and I'll meet you 2 days later." I did respond to Lou that I would have had a shower and she's free to join me earlier, but that wasn't her point. Her point was that our celebrations and reflections are often in our own context. Only you can understand the challenge of cleaning up spew, reaching a certain speed or not, or acknowledging someone's help during a manoeuvre. That's one of the fundamental elements of offshore sailing. Meeting the challenge of the unforgiving sea that the unforgiving sea can present is a unique achievement and something we cherish and value. We want to be able to celebrate. We also need to understand that our sport is but a microcosm of society. Our conduct and behaviour ashore is often the only interaction the wider public has with offshore sailing. Audi Centre Sydney support us in part because they believe our values and behaviours reflect their quality brand. Please celebrate positively, treat each other with respect and enjoy responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and I particularly want to reinforce the last message so eloquently put by David in terms of respecting ourselves after the race and our fellow competitors. So thank you for mentioning it with us. Are there any questions that people would like to raise now for David or Justine or any other member of our race team? Yes.
In light of the Oz-ENC briefing that happened here and taking all that on board, is there any discussion about moving to less of a requirement on the paper charts and more of a requirement on the ENCs? And for instance, saying, okay, if you've got old paper charts, as long as you've got up-to-date electronic charts, that suffices.
I'd like to thank you for the Dorothy Dixer. No, a very pertinent question and one that is being discussed. Until we understand that the AHO's exact date of ceasing to pursue paper charts, I think we're bound, and until we work through our governing body, Australian Sailing and indeed World Sailing, and get a consistent approach that allows us to take a determined step forward with paper charts, I think we're bound to be with what we are at the moment. We're constantly reviewing it. We are in communications with the AHO to understand when they will cease producing paper charts. And again, that doesn't mean there's no paper charts. The purpose, of course, of paper charts is to serve as a backup to the electronic systems that we have and the various, particularly in sailing where we might not have dual power supplies as they do in commercial arrangements. So paper charts will still exist. I believe where they're heading is to say, here's a chip you can buy with your charts, good day, print away, and we recommend A3, this type of paper, go for it. When that happens and when they formally advise their position, I'm pretty sure the governing bodies and indeed CYC would look forward to pushing that. It's on the near horizon, yes.
I think we could be proactive in terms of sort of saying we recommend that people start thinking about this in the same way that we did with AIS, in the same way that we did with EPIRBs when they first came out and 406 EPIRBs, so that you're giving people a direction, because for many people it hasn't got onto their horizon
Understood. And one other side issue, and it's not necessarily the intent or purpose of your question, and that is around the cost of it. Conscious of that for paper charts, we need to understand that the cost for those who might not be employing electronic charting at the moment, because it's not a mandatory requirement, we need to understand what the cost benefit of that activity is and the best path forward. Point taken, perhaps I can work with the sailing manager and the sailing office to move that forward a bit. Understood. Yeah, good point.
Thank you. Next question.
Just a clarification on the communications. In communication 7.2, it says the position reports are 0005, 0805, 60. They're not quite the sched times that you gave us. Communication 7.2.
Sorry, could I ask you to perhaps, fair question, we've just issued permanent amendment 2, which replaces clause 7 in total. That will overtake that. If you do have questions afterwards, after you've read that permanent amendment 2, more than happy to entertain them, sir.
Just before we finish up, I just wanted to remind you that 10 years ago this year we had obviously a very tragic Flinders Islet race. And on Sunday the 6th of October, there'll be a gathering here at the CYCA in remembrance of Andrew and Sally, who, as we will recall, lost their lives 10 years ago today. It'll be a very informal affair. Obviously, those who knew them were very likely to attend, but if you are around the club, do drop in for a drink and remember, two very fantastic sailors and wonderful club members. Other than that, I've been asked to remind you, as David pointed out, for you to pick up your trackers before the closing date, tonight if not tomorrow. And other than that, have a safe race. I look forward to seeing you over the weekend and for the rest of the Blue Water Series. Thank you for coming this evening. Bye-bye.